For me, Sansa's so tragic. Yes, she should maybe open up to Tyrion a little bit. Like, we would love for her to do that, but is it not completely justifiable that she would not at this point? I mean, we're talking about a character in book one who was so trusting of ideals and of fairy tales and statuses and titles, only to have all of that come crashing down on her head when her father is decapitated and she is to be wed to a monster named Joffrey Baratheon. So it's one of these things where we're begging her, just listen to Tyrion a little bit, but also completely reasonable that she would not trust anyone. And I think that is a pretty sad thing for the character arc of Sansa, right? Is the fact that she loses trust in people and that she has no one around her. And where she's at right now in the story, clearly Peter Baelish is not looking out for her best interest. But I do believe in the last two books, if we were ever to get them, that I think one of the big pieces of Sansa's character arc is beginning to trust again, but it will be the right people this time, which would make for a very beautiful reunion between her and Arya, right? Someone she did not like, treated very poorly, I would say, though Arya wasn't innocent in the first book. To have her come back around and being like, you know what, actually I can trust you, I think would be a pretty beautiful moment for Sansa's character arc. But at this point in the story, yeah, she's down bad. She seems to have no allies other than a drunken, disgraced knight. But yeah, it's sad. Definitely would love for her to trust Tyrion and open up. But also the whole fertile thing's really disturbing, right? Like I hate that. I hate that so much.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, this chapter really is, and that's one of the things that this actually I think is probably one of the most important, if not underrated, chapters in the series, because there is so much happening here from really two characters' perspectives, both Tyrion and Sansa's, and this is one of those things where, we talked a little bit about earlier the point of view. This would be such a different read from Sansa's perspective. And I almost, it's like, obviously we have this version, but she doesn't know yet that her brother's dead.
Right.
And
she doesn't know the full scale of what's happened.
Yeah, she has no idea about the full scale. So it would almost be more, I don't want to say it's more interesting. George wrote it this way, and we're just looking at it in hindsight. But that would be such an interesting way to read it, as you get like even a small Sansa chapter where she's with Tyrion and she doesn't know, the details of it. But I think also the weight of it is now on Tyrion and the Lannister side. And I think that that's just such a more powerful way to do this, because now you're like even more worried about Sansa. So the weight of the worry and the weight of the fear of like, oh no, what's going to happen to Sansa now? Right. And because now it's now the imp. Remember, book Tyrion is not as good looking as Peter Dinklage. Okay,
right?
You know what I mean? He is like nose is chopped off, and he's very ugly little imp. Is really much so. And now you're hearing, now he's gonna have to impregnate her and all this stuff. Jeez. The weight of that is pushing on him. I know it's bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. This medieval world that you're living in here. But I think doing it from Tyrion's point of view was ultimately the right call. But I mean, that just would have been such an interesting. That would be something we talked about last week or the week before. If we could ask George, like we could ever interview him and ask him some questions, like what does like non wins a winner, like what decides, like what was the decision behind like a chapter like that's being like, no, this should come from Tyrion's point of view. I mean, here he gets to move the story forward by having it be from Tyrion's instead of Sansa's point of view, by getting the information from Joffrey. And also like that's a big thing too. But I mean, you still could have done it. Like imagine if it's not in the hand of the king and Joffrey walks in and like Tyrion and Sansa are having, breakfast or something. And then he tells it to her, because then he gets to like look in her eyes. There's just so many.
Yeah. It's one of the hardest parts about storytelling is once you pen it down, go through the edits and send it in, it's over. Like it is sealed. Now, like you said, some authors do go back and write things from the POV. That's cool. But for the most part, the majority of writers, once it's done, it's done. You can only do it one way, and then you put it forward. I think another reason probably to give this chapter to Tyrion is that the end of this book is very much a Tyrion ending. We get the moment with Jaime, which really catapults Tyrion to a different
realm.
Character arc. Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about the intersection of Jaime and Tyrion as one starts to degrade and one is now looking for redemption, and who's the hero and who's the villain of them. I don't think our terms hero and villain really apply too much to A Song of Ice and Fire. It's more about the perspective of who's looking at that character, whether or not they're good or evil. But this chapter also really gets to flex the way George is able to use information as tension. So with us in the head of Tyrion, who now does know about what happened, at least knowing something terrible happened, that information that's being withheld, and we're not saying from Sansa's POV, we are therefore secondarily worried about Sansa during a Tyrion chapter, which makes the investment so much more because you're flipping the pages hoping to get a Sansa chapter next. At least I was. So George has always been someone who manipulates information really, really well. And I think it's a little less annoying to read it from a POV who is aware of what's happened. Like if we got into a Sansa chapter and it was 20 pages and 18 pages is of her not knowing and then finding out at the very end, it would be effective. But I feel like those 18 pages would be laborious because we'd be like, I just want to find out what she thinks, like once she finds it out, right? Also, information travels very slowly in Westeros. We've talked about this so many times with like Arya hearing little things about the Red Wedding, but not quite the whole story with the phrase. And it's telling, it's obvious, it's clear as day that this was a pre-orchestrated event. There was deals made behind closed doors. It was going to happen one way or another. But the final like nail in that coffin to say, okay, this has absolutely been planned meticulously is the fact that King's Landing finds out about the results so fast. Information does not travel this fast, usually, right? Immediately they know. Now, it could have been a few days. Like, we don't know how much time passes between, but there's always been a delay in information in this world, especially if we cross the narrow sea to Essos, where Dany finds out about Robert's death, far into book 2.
Right. Yeah. It's like book 2.
Yeah. It's so long. I think that's just just a little consistency thing where it's like, oh, that information traveled pretty quick for it to be, a surprise. Clearly it was not. And I know that's obvious looking back, but it's just a little thing that George does to kind of keep the world consistent, I think.